ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Finding Asheville podcast with Nathan Miller.
Well, for one thing I like more people in Asheville to be aware of is unions are always an option. Mm-hmm. I've heard more than one person, and even very educated people, say, "Oh, you can't form unions in North Carolina," which is a complete load of crud. Federal law.
Why is there that assumption? Because
we do have laws called right to work laws that do make it harder for a union to function. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. However, the laws protecting people's basic rights in their workplace are federal. Mm-hmm. They are not state. They are not local. They are federal. They apply in every state. Mm-hmm. And they cover They cover people who want to join a union. They also cover. I don't think people know in this town a lot of the time that you can't be fired for bringing an issue up with your boss. Yeah. You can't be fired for making a complaint. You can be fired for saying you think something is unethical or wrong. Yeah. Those are protected, and if someone fires or retaliates against you because of it, there is actually a legal process people can go through to get some remedy for that. Mm-hmm. It helps to have a union backing you up, and I think it's a good idea if people have serious issues with their workplace to look into forming a union, because it kind of puts a part in a business's power structure where, they have to think about wages. Yeah. They have to talk to people about how their concerns are. You can't brush them off. And it makes not impossible to fire someone, but unions rightly generally insist that, you can't just fire someone on a whim, that you have to, prove that there was some measurable performance issue. And any of those things alone, I think a number of businesses would be improved for, not just the employees' lives, but the functioning of the businesses themselves. So we looked at kind of all of that and we're like, look, a lot of us are, kind of work to the bone. We don't feel comfortable with the way the paper's going. There's clear problems with morale. So, a union could ensure things like we got to talk about where our wages are. We got to talk about, bonuses if there's a big extra project we got to do. We've got to talk about, if people are getting worked too many hours or if the workload's not fairly distributed. We can put in place a professional, code of ethics and conduct that applies to everyone. We can put in place some kind of more professional standards. And, this is a way to make sure that has to be done. Yeah. That you have to talk to the workers. And that was kind of the thought process. And so we talked to the Communications Works of America, who were great about providing support and advice and really reaching out to us. Yeah. And that was, and they have throughout this process and throughout all the ups and downs and kind of trials and tribulations been nothing less than excellent providing support for all the workers involved. Yeah.
Well, you can start a union in the state of North Carolina, but it has to be difficult after covering the Sitel story. So what lessons did you learn from that you applied in trying to organize the Express?
Well, specifically, I knew to reach out to a union early. Yeah. And it is difficult. And it's difficult, I think, less because of law than culture. Despite all its, protestations of being a liberal culture, this is a way in which Asheville is not liberal at all. A lot of businesses are liberal until their workers complain about their conditions. And then they will act just as conservatively, if one wants to use that term, or just as harshly, I think is a better term, just as harshly as, any traditional corporate boss, if not more so in some cases. In the Express case, you had a local newspaper hiring an incredibly expensive union-busting law firm to break up the union among its own employees. And I think that's a good example of kind of where the battle lines can be drawn when workers really start seriously talking about their conditions. So we knew it was going to be tough, and it was, no two ways about it. Yeah. And it remains to be seen whether that effort will have success or not. I think that eventually it will, and I think some points have already been made about that, including outside of Express, that people can try to form unions, that they can, go after employers if they fire someone illegally, or without just cause. They can demand some form of recompense for that, or some form of justice for it. And they can, even make employee handbooks and workplace rules have to be overhauled or changed. And so what I learned from the Sitel thing was there were a number of people who would have normally been fired from Sitel in the attempt to crush the union there, but weren't. The union saved their jobs. The union helped them out. It gave them support. So I learned there was some power there. And I also remember the need to talk to my coworkers. And, I still know everything's going to shake out from that, but I think it did send a signal kind of in Asheville, whatever else happens. And, recently, and this is public knowledge, Express did have to, revise or massively overhaul a number of its rules after the Labor Relations Board, found that the union's charges
Yeah, I was
had
going to
merit.
say, they not only hired a union-busting law firm, but they instituted a backlash with the rules, right?
Yes, a huge backlash
And
with
what
the rules.
were those rules?
Well, there were a number of rules that made it very hard to talk to outside organizations, people about business matters, including other employees. The rules asserted broad rights to our electronic communications, and the full thing is up on expressunion.wordpress.com, which is the official blog of the union effort at Express, and they had to revoke. They had to revoke those rules. And
the one thing didn't they like pull a week of vacation without any notice or
they
something?
did.
Yeah.
They did. That was something, we complained about too, and this is the middle of the union fight, veteran employees, myself included, people who worked there for 5 years or more, lost, I think about on average, 4 to 7 paid time off days, maybe more in some case, people would work there longer. No explanation. And that's I think that's that sort of decision making, even though that's not, wasn't necessarily something that, like some of the other restrictive rules, we found immediately illegal. That the fact that step will be undertaken, I think, shows abundantly what the attitude of management there was, and how much they valued their employees, and the steps they were kind of willing to take, and who they regarded expendable.
Why do you think people here in Asheville are so scared of unions? Like, in my context, I know somebody that works for Mission, and nurses there have not gotten a raise in 5 years. And every now and then, management is like, okay, you can't take PTO this month. Like, what? That seems, if you get a union, it seems to resolve those issues. Why do you think people...
Desperation. People are terrified in this town because wages are so low, the cost of living is so high. And I think because there's not knowledge about people's protections, I think that even just the bare legal protections we have under state law and the somewhat more robust ones under federal law get violated all the time in this city. But people are terrified. They talk out about it. They won't get hired somewhere else.
Yeah.
They're terrified that, they'll be penalized, at a business for it. They're terrified that, they will go from barely scraping by, not having anything. I think there's ways to solve that, but it's going to take time. It's going to take, frankly, more union campaigns, and it's going to take, the workplace conditions in Asheville becoming a serious topic of discussion publicly and not getting glossed over. To me, it's less important that a new restaurant is opening than how are the workers there being treated. And if the answer is great and they're happy, awesome. That's excellent. But I think the fact of the matter is, with how low the pay is around here and with a number of other issues, I think in many cases that's not happening. And so I think you're going to see more and more of it, hopefully, because it is a way to actually resolve some of these issues as time goes on. And with that, with each case where it's, it becomes a serious issue or there's even a successful drive, then I think you'll start to see more people say, well, why can't we do that?
Yeah.
What can we do? And, even just the fact that, it's a phone call away from a union for people to protect, get some protection for like just starting to talk to their coworkers.
Yeah.
For getting free legal help if their boss does retaliate against them. Even just awareness of that, I think would help a lot of people out around here.
What goes through your head when you're suspended on April 4th?
A lot of things. I was... there had been a pattern of ongoing retaliation since they found out I'd been involved with organizing a union in October. That's the assertion of the charge the union filed against them, the one that's currently on appeal. And I witnessed it. It was dismaying. It was disappointing. I knew that was a possibility the second I walked back into the offices with my friend Max Cooper, who had been terminated in October, and let them know that a union thing was going on. I was a little shocked by the severity of their reaction, but not that much. And I'd fortunately freelanced on the side for a number of years. Yeah. So I had some business to fall back on. And I had some other income sources besides just my day job. So, there was a bit of okay, well, this is got to dip in the savings account, kind of the practical stuff you just have to do. Got to dip in the savings account, got to call the union attorney, got to get the details arranged, got to hustle up a bunch more freelance work. How do I survive? And then kind of, after that point, it was, just, well, what do I do next?
Yeah.
And fortunately, some of the things I'd seen there, or the things that we had endured there, I think showed that there was a need for a different way of doing journalism, and for a different way to run a newspaper. And I hope the union drive there will be successful. I do. There are a lot of the vast majority of people that work for Express, including many of the managers, are awesome people. And in better circumstances, they could produce an amazing paper. And there's still some good work that gets done there. But I think it's that the case of the union fight there showed that there's clearly some change that needs to happen as well.
Your claim is the reason why you were suspended and eventually terminated is your union drive efforts. Their claim is you releasing that story that was property of the Express. What is the true story, and can you answer that question?
I mean, there's a reason it's on appeal. And there's a reason that the union's lawyer took a look over the case and was like, yeah, this is obvious retaliation. I mean, I can't go into all the details about that. I mean, the piece is up there for anyone who'd like to read. And the introduction makes it clear that they kept threatening me repeatedly throughout the process on that story specifically. And there are cases where newspapers don't have a right to stories they don't run. That they refuse to run, that they make it clear they will not run in any circumstances. Otherwise, the world will be full of newspapers that just vaulted stories and never ran them and never did anything with them. And that's not generally how it works. And so I can say that the ethical concerns raised around that story had been part and parcel of the union drive for a very long time, including in my case. And that, and people can read Max Cooper's letter that he was fired after. He raises ethical concerns in that letter as well. Talking about those kind of concerns, is part of a union drive. Publicly, even talking about those concerns and even criticizing a company publicly about those concerns is part of that activity. And that's after a lot of very careful review, that's the position of the union's attorneys. And, we'll see how it goes. The legal system is a very strange beast. That sometimes it gets very just results. It sometimes doesn't get justice at all. And sometimes it hits somewhere in between.
Looking back on this whole process, do you understand any of management's views? Do you empathize with them?
No, not a one.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I think that they had abundant opportunities to chart a better course. People can also look at the initial announcement in November where, we hoped we could reach a solution. Where we hoped, kind of address these concerns. And their reaction, the cuts in vacation time, the harsh rules that eventually they had to repeal, under essentially threat of a federal trial. And the kind of strife that continued. I don't know exactly where all their motivations are coming from. I think at some point, just speculation about that is fruitless. But I don't agree with any one of their decisions. It made what was already a fairly tense situation far, far, far worse, and they had so many opportunities to do differently.
Okay, some people may be listening to this and be like, yeah, union sounds like a good idea, until they find out that you were suspended/terminated. So why are you a good example of why?
Because my colleagues at Stormy and Express are working under had rules that violated their rights ended. They can't be penalized or hurt under those rules anymore. Because Max Cooper, who was also fired, got a settlement in return. And normally, with a normal kind of Asheville firing, he would have gotten nothing. Even though his rights had been violated. I mean, there is a risk to it? Absolutely. And I don't want anyone to think otherwise. But the more people you have on board and the better union supports you, the better an outcome it'll be. And, to some degree, right now, people don't know if they'll have health insurance the next day walking to work. Right now, they can have their rights and conditions taken away anyway. So essentially, they're already in a risky position, period, every single day. Most workers in this town are. at least fighting for a union, there's the risk with some possibility of something better at the end of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people have hit again and again in eras where there's been widespread poverty and inequality, and I think it's where Asheville will eventually come to as well.